Good evening, ghouls. We've explored the intentional conjuring of ghosts with cases like the Philip experiment, and we have reason to believe that the energies of the living can often fuel paranormal phenomena. But what about unconscious energy? Do you believe that we can manifest a haunting by accident? And if so, well, how the hell do we reverse the process? I'm DreyOfTheDead, and it's time to feed your head. The beautiful manor of Ash was built in Sussex, England in the 13th century during the time of Edward the Confessor. Much of the original structure was destroyed and rebuilt, but one portion remained over the years. On June 24, 1934, Maurice and Catherine Kelly purchased the property and moved in with their servants and 14-year-old daughter. What the family didn't know was that the manor's reputation was perhaps larger than the house itself. As rumor had it, the manor was haunted, despite no reports of disturbances within the last 20 years. Once the family moved in, it didn't take long before strange occurrences began to unfold. It began in the attic. A series of stomping noises were heard by Mr. Kelly, as if someone were walking on the floorboards. The problem? The floorboards had been removed ages ago, leaving only bare hoists. On November 18th at approximately 3:45 a.m., Maurice was awoken by 3 violent thumps on his bedroom door. He sprang up to investigate and check in on his wife as they slept in separate bedrooms. When he arrived in her room, he found her awake and also startled by the sound. "Did you hear that?" he asked. "Yes," Catherine answered. 3 violent bangs. Neither were able to find or explain just what had caused the disturbance. Around the same time the next night, Maurice was once again startled out of sleep by 2 violent bangs. This was the first inkling the family had that something supernatural might be involved. Mr. Kelly left the family for a few days on business, and during that time, no activity occurred within the house. He returned on November 25th and was met with a strange sense of darkness as he entered the house. His room was also unnaturally cold. Though he resisted sleep that night, he nodded off around 3 a.m., and just moments later, there was a single heavy bang against the door. He sat up abruptly. A man was staring back at him from the doorway. He was, as Maurice described, a small older man in a green smock with muddy breeches and gaiters. He wore a slouch hat and a handkerchief around his neck. Maurice first assumed that he was a vagrant and shouted, "Who are you? What do you want in my house?" The man simply stared back blankly. Mr. Kelly jumped out of bed and tried to grab the man by the shoulder, but his hand met no physical form. It simply fell through the man. This was the last thing Maurice remembered, right before he passed out. Maurice awoke in his wife's room, babbling incoherently. Catherine had heard an appalling scream the night before and then witnessed him run into her room and faint. His face was livid, his eyes were bulging, she recounted. Terror was written over every line of his countenance. During the late 19th and early 20th century, brandy was thought to aid in the resuscitation of those who'd fainted. Afraid that her husband was dying, Mrs. Kelly ran down the hall towards the wine cellar. Upon her return, she came across the old man in Maurice's doorway. She noted a red kerchief around his neck and a pudding bowl helmet on his head. He was red in the face, his eyes malevolent and horrid. His mouth hung open, and he stared at her dumbfounded and drooling. "What do you want?" she demanded. "Who are you?" She attempted to strike him, but her fist went right through him, slamming into the doorframe. Unfortunately, the family couldn't quite escape the intangible stranger. They began referring to him as the Green Man, and he made at least 24 more appearances around the house, usually to Mr. Kelly. The knocks and footsteps continued as well. The Green Man often showed up in front of the fireplace in Maurice's room. Catherine discovered that she could make him vanish by touching him, but her husband couldn't. On one occasion, the spirit raised his head to reveal that his throat had been slashed all the way around. Something horrible was sticking out, she described, like a cut windpipe. She speculated that perhaps the man was a victim of murder. Understandably, the Green Man's appearances were highly distressing to the family. The servants were so frightened by the apparition that they quit their jobs. The Kellys reached out to a priest who invoked God's blessing on the house, which only caused the activity to increase. They placed ads in the newspaper asking for anyone who might be able to exorcise the spirit. Two alleged ghost hunters answered the call. They spun an elaborate story of a 19th century cobbler seeking revenge upon a milkmaid who had spurned his advances. They assured the Kellys that the haunting was over, took their money, and left. Expectedly, the activity continued. Word spread about the Kellys' ghost, and 6 months later, a paranormal author came to visit Ash Manor, inviting parapsychologist and psychoanalyst Nandor Fodor to come along. Nandor was one of the leading authorities on paranormal phenomena at the time. He'd recently published the widely renowned Encyclopedia of Psychic Science and was the chief researcher for the London-based International Institute of Psychical Research. He arrived at the home to find the family visibly distressed and fearful of any publicity that would ruin their social status. He stayed at the house, took photographs, and even slept in the haunted room. At no point did the Green Man manifest, nor was there any unexplainable knocking or footsteps. Fodor decided to invite English medium Eileen J. Garrett to the manor. She arrived on July 25th with her daughter and American friend Dr. Elmer Lindsay. Together, they got to work, and the Green Man's story began to unfold. Eileen claimed she sensed an imprisoned man, someone who had suffered a great deal and was harboring a dark secret. That evening, the investigators held a sitting in Mr. Kelly's bedroom. Eileen went into a trance and called forth her control or spirit guide, Uvani. Uvani expressed that ghosts draw on the energy of the unhappy and are revived by negative emotions. Haven't you discovered that these things only happen to you when you're in a bad emotional state, physically or mentally disturbed? She said. Don't you realize that you yourself vivify this memory? She claimed that a jail existed near the house in the early 15th century where many perished and remained after death. Anyone in the house who was nervously depleted was, in essence, fueling these spirits. Uvani then permitted the Green Man to inhabit Eileen. Her breathing grew, her body became stiff, and her features became those of a tortured man. The Kellys recognized this face to be the Green Man's. Eileen beckoned for Nandor to come closer. She reached out and seized his hand in a grip so powerful he shouted in pain. "Mercy! Mercy!" the medium cried out in Greek. Then, in archaic English, the spirit begged to be reunited with his wife. He expressed rage against someone named Buckingham, a former friend who had seduced his spouse. Nandor handed Eileen a pencil and notebook, and she began to write in a strange script that was later attested not to be her own. Henley, she scrawled, then Edward Charles, and Essay, which turned out to be a village near Ash Manor. Henley claimed he was taken from his wife and son and left to rot in jail. Seeking revenge, he asked those in the room to help him rise up against those who had wronged him. Many occultists maintain that hatred and revenge are among the most common motives keeping spirits earthbound. Nandor informed the ghost that he was dead and asked Henley to give up his quest for revenge and return to his wife and son. Reluctantly, he eventually agreed to do so for his family. The medium grasped Nandor's hand again. "Hold me, I cannot stay. I'm slipping, don't leave me," she shouted before slumping back in her chair. But the haunting was far from over. Just 24 hours later, Maurice reached out to Nandor. "He's here again. He's standing in the doorway, opening his mouth and trying to speak." He was also rather smug with Nandor about the exorcism failing. The spirit also appeared to another medium who knew nothing of the haunting and reached out to Dr. Lindsay requesting he hold another seance. Another seance was held without the Kellys in the room, and the ghost once again pleaded for the group to avenge him. Uvani claimed that the couple was using Henley to embarrass each other and that they did not want him to genuinely leave. She also claimed that if the house remained an unhappy place, the hauntings would grow and affect future tenants. Nandor felt he was close to finding the source of the haunting and pressed Mrs. Kelly for answers. She finally confessed that her husband was gay and that there was a great deal of tension between them. To alleviate her sexual frustrations, she'd turned to morphine. Maurice acknowledged Uvani's claims that he didn't want the ghost to leave, but now felt possessed by the spirit. At this admission, he felt the ghost retreat, and it was never seen or heard of again. The claims and handwriting of Henley were investigated, but deemed inconclusive. No historical information could be found to verify his existence. Nandor considered that maybe the ghost had been purely an invention of Mr. Kelly's mind, perhaps a manifestation of shame borrowed by Eileen during the seances. But it was clear that much of the phenomena in Ash Manor seemed truly supernatural, and that the ghost had been witnessed and heard by several people, as well as the family dog. The case became one of Nandor's most famous and served to provide reasoning to why some individuals are haunted at a particular place while others are not. He concluded that sometimes those in unguarded psychological states, especially in places rich with history, can be more susceptible to encountering the paranormal. If you enjoyed this strange but true tale, be sure to subscribe and check out previous episodes. We put out new videos every other Friday. If you enjoy blooper reels, Q&As, and behind-the-scenes footage, I would recommend joining my Patreon. These are just some of the patrons who make these videos possible. Also, if you truly enjoyed this story, I highly recommend our episode on the Philip experiment, which is all about a group of people who invent their own ghost, and the story is absolutely fascinating. As always, thank you so much for watching. Be well and stay strange.